This is EchoTruths reporting for ICR. I want to talk to you today about why I can never eat a sausage roll again. So, a lot of people in the USA won't be familiar with Gregg's bakery. It's like the main bakery in the UK. And the only sausage rolls was actually able to eat. And a sub of mine, Abby, commented telling me about Gregg, the heir of Gregg's bakery, who has recently been jailed. Victims of paedophile Gregg have told how their childhoods were ruined by the Gregg's heir, who is now behind bars. The 75-year-old of Home Farmstead in Gosforth, Newcastle, had denied the offences, blaming those who he had abused, saying he was the victim of a witch hunt and that the complainants were looking for compensation. In a statement released by Northumbria Police, one of his victims said Gregg was a man who he had invested an enormous amount of trust and respect in. He said, "It was impossible for me to believe that he could have done what I know he did to me. As an 11-year-old, my naivety and emotional immaturity meant that the only way I could resolve this dilemma was to assume that what had happened was my own fault. For many years, shame and embarrassment were easier to tolerate than the truth. Mr. Gregg's abuse of power and trust left me with an extremely cynical and mistrustful view. It took a long time for me to develop the maturity to comprehend the reality of what actually happened to me." The victim went on to say he had not been motivated by vengeance to eventually tell his story, but a desire to set reality straight. He added, "I had taken nearly 26 years to comprehend that black was black, and now I was once again being put under enormous pressure to believe that black was white. I was very grateful that the jury recognised the reality and were not persuaded to believe that black was white." Another victim said he wanted to put it behind him and never hear the name Gregg again. A quote from him: "I feel remorse that I could not find the strength and courage to come forward earlier and support others in earlier claims against this man. However, I am pleased that this trial has finally put Gregg where he belongs. I hope he can reflect upon his actions in prison and feel shame for those whose lives he has adversely affected over a number of years." He added, "I also feel sympathy for the parents of the children who will undoubtedly but unjustly feel guilt for putting their trust in this man and not seeing what was happening. A scenario I sincerely hope I will never have to face with any child of mine." So this man now, who says he just wants to put it behind him and never hear the name Gregg, unfortunately isn't going to be able to do that just yet, because Gregg has lodged an appeal against his child sex conviction, which, by the way, has been going on since, I believe it was 1997, the first report against him was made. And then thrown out, and then there was another one a year later. But it wasn't until this happened, which I believe was 2013, and he's only just been sentenced. Anyway, disgraced head teacher Gregg has launched an appeal against his conviction and sentence for child sex charges, we can reveal. The millionaire son of the Gregg's bakery founder was guilty of 9 counts of indecently assaulting 4 victims. A court heard how the 75-year-old charity boss molested the boys, who were aged between 11 and 14, from the early 1960s until the 1990s. The abuse carried out was in a swimming pool, in a car, and at his home gym. Branding him a sophisticated predatory paedophile, Judge Robin Mayers jailed Gregg for 13.5 years. Now it is understood that Gregg has lodged an appeal against both his conviction and sentence. Northumbria has urged any other victims of Gregg to come forward. DC Chris Wilson, who led the investigation, said, The victims in this case showed immense bravery to come forward and stand up in court to give the evidence that ultimately put their abuser through court. It was a terrifying ordeal for them, but their actions have helped convict a predatory paedophile, and I'm sure that convictions such as this will help encourage other victims of sexual abuse to come forward. He looks eerily like Rolf Harris there. Eerily. These sort of offences are not, and nor have they ever been, acceptable behaviour, and national media stories over the last few years should provide reassurance of that to any victims out there. Really? Safeguarding vulnerable victims of crime is our absolute priority, and if there are other victims out there, then we would encourage them to come forward. We will believe you. Gregg helped set up the family business and also worked as a charity fundraiser, a social worker, and as a head teacher at a prestigious North East school. One of the scariest parts for me about Pedogate is how many of these people are teachers or charity workers, and specifically charity workers with children. It is just so disturbing, and I would ask why and how these people were allowed to slip through the net. But it's because, and I'm sorry, but I'm going to completely contradict this article, it's because, no, people don't feel like they can come forward. And most of the time, when they do, particularly in historic cases, they're thrown out. Or this happens, they appeal, and then they have to go through more hell, and more hell. So no. I don't think that anything that is being done about this kind of shit, I don't think it's making anybody feel confident about coming forward. And that's really sad. But anyway, thank you for listening. This has been EchoTruths reporting for ICR.